In this video, I'm going to show you how to design and build this 12-inch subwoofer enclosure. For the design process, you should use some type of software like WinISD. Even if you just go with the manufacturer's recommended specifications, you can use WinISD to pin down your port size and make sure that your port opening is big enough so that you don't get any chuffing. The goal here is to minimize the port airspeed velocity while making the port as simple as possible. After doing a little bit of math, I settled on this design here because this should be simple and easy to build. The port is just one piece that runs almost the full length of the entire box. You don't need to use software like SketchUp for this, but you do need to take time to sketch out your plans. It'll lower the odds of messing up later. I've got several videos on my channel showing how to use both of these pieces of software. I'll make sure to give you some links to them down in the video description. Now it's time to make some sawdust. If you're anything like me, then you probably have a lot of scrap pieces left over from previous projects. The goal here is to use up as much of that as you can. These pieces here will become the sides, the port, and the brace. The rest of the components are all the exact same width, so you want to make those cuts at the exact same time. The top and the bottom are the exact same size, so set the fence and make those cuts before resetting the fence to cut the back and the two baffles. Now's a good time to cut some corner 45s or any additional braces if you want to use them. Before assembly, you always want to do a dry fit. This is also a good time to double check your brace placement. You don't want that brace interfering with your speaker cutout. Speaking of the speaker cutout, now's a good time to mark out these locations. You can cut them out with a router and a circle jig or even just with a jigsaw, but I like to cut them out using template rings over on the router table because I've got a great dust collection set up for the router table. The process is kind of involved. A circle jig's a lot quicker. What you've got to do is rough cut with a jigsaw, then take the templates down and use a flush trim bit to trim out the cutouts. Off camera, I did the same thing with the center brace. The outer baffle will get wrapped in vinyl a little bit later, so keep watching. To improve the look and to make it easier to wrap, this piece gets a roundover both on the speaker cutout and the outside perimeter. And while that roundover bit is still in the router, take a minute to look around and see if there's anything else that needs a roundover, like the brace or the inside of the port. Then what you want to do is flip the board over and cut a rabbet. This will make life a lot easier later when you're ready to wrap your pieces. The inside baffle gets a rabbet as well, more on that later. Now it's time to assemble the enclosure. For this type of box with the port firing out the left side, a great way to start is to combine the left side, the port, and the brace. These pieces will connect to the front baffle later on in the process, so the next logical step is to attach the bottom to the front. I recently picked up a set of parallel clamps to see if that makes the process a little bit easier. The jury's still out on these. After that, you can go ahead and attach the other side. In this case, it's the right side. Now is also a good time to stop and see if you can install any corner 45s. Sometimes it's easier to put them in now instead of after the box is assembled. The next step is to attach the port assembly to the front and bottom of the enclosure, followed by the back and the top. it's always a good idea to put a round over on your port. A cordless trim router, it gets the job done, but you can see why I prefer to do this kind of thing over on the router table where I've got good dust collection. This thing kicks up a ton of this nasty MDF dust. It's a really fine powder. It'll get in your lungs. You're gonna want to use a dust mask anytime you're working with MDF. A little black spray paint on the port and the baffle, and you're ready to move on to the next step, wrapping the enclosure. For the baffle, I'm going with some gray vinyl. Earlier in the build, you saw me cut rabbets on the underside of this piece. That rabbet gives me a place to stick the vinyl. Some people like to drive staples in to help keep the vinyl secure, and others just trust that the adhesive will stick. Tell me down in the comments which way you think works best. The rest of the enclosure is wrapped in black carpet. You can see right here why I cut the rabbet in the inner baffle. Use it as a guide for the carpet. You may have noticed that I'm using a razor knife for this process. This particular knife has a flat piece of metal on one end, so it's like two tools in one. You just have to remember to retract the blade before you flip it around to use the flat piece. After the carpet's trimmed back, it's just a matter of spreading some wood glue and sticking the outer baffle to the rest of the enclosure. No screws or nails, just some 8-inch subwoofers for weights. You want to let that sit for a few hours while the glue sets up. While you wait, go ahead and install some speaker terminals. I like these because they're easier than terminal cups. All you have to do is drill a couple of holes. Plus it looks a lot better than just using a bolt. I'll make sure to give you links to these plus everything else I use in the video down in the video description. So this is a dual 2-ohm subwoofer. To get a 1-ohm load, you want to wire the voice coils in parallel. I was in a hurry and I skipped a step. After dropping the sub in, I drilled out some pilot holes and then screwed the sub down. You really should mark the screw locations with a center punch and then pull the driver out and drill the holes before you drop the subwoofer into the cutout. Do as I say, not as I do. And it looks like crap. I botched the vinyl. Let me show you a trick to fix that. Okay, so the box isn't perfect. They can't all be winners. Let's go ahead and see how it sounds. It's hard to get a clean recording to show you the sound quality because this subwoofer is rattling everything in the garage. First impression is this thing will get the job done, but what I really want to do is compare it to this 2x8 box right here and this box with 4 6.5s. To find out which is better, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss the video. Before I go, I've got to say thank you to all of my patrons, with a bonus shout out to $25 and up patrons: Bo, Timothy, Dylan, JD America, Mark, Paul, David, and Jonathan.